Welcome to the Sharewell iTicket Implementation, Verification, and Closure for Change video. In this video, we will walk through the change management workflow for those three topics. We begin this video moving out of the platform approval or CAB approval phase and moving into the implementation phase. During this phase, the logic is fairly straightforward. Execute the planned tasks in the order listed. If there is a problem, resolve it and move forward to the next stage, or execute your backup plan to revert back to the prior state. During this stage, communication is key. Many people may be working on the same change you're working on. However, don't assume they're working on only your change. Prior to the change owner needs to verify that all of the tasks have been acknowledged by the task recipients. As you can see, several of the tasks in this group have not been acknowledged, meaning potentially these tasks do not have resources to perform them. All of these tasks are currently assigned to me, so I'm going to quickly go through and one by one acknowledge those tasks and switch them to an acknowledged state. As you may notice, there are only three colors in the tasks right now. Gray meaning it's been done, green meaning it's been acknowledged, and blue meaning it's in a waiting state. The blue task is the last task as we go from implementation into verification stage. It has a dependency attached to it. As you can see, the dependency has not yet been met. If you open up the task, you can see what the dependency task is, or you can click on the virtualization. When looking at the virtualization, it's important to remember that the red arrow is backwards, meaning that 26650 flows down into 26356. This is not obvious or intuitive, but it's the way it works. Remember, when linking tasks, you have two options. Link to upstream tasks or create downstream tasks. Oftentimes, milestones will already be created by the system and will need upstream tasks connected to them. However, we don't have a function called create upstream tasks at this time, so you'll need to make an upstream task as an independent task first and then link them later. One of the problems with dependent tasks during an implementation is that each task must be closed before the next task begins. This isn't always practical since there isn't a notification when your task is available to execute. This leaves people having to manually check to see if they're next up. Again, this is why entering times in implementation tasks is important. Additionally, adding a sequence number to the task title can accomplish very similar results and in some cases make the flow easier to understand. As you can see, when I pull up my tasks for this time period, I have multiple tasks associated with multiple changes. Time estimates are essential. Without times, I would have very little understanding of when to perform a particular task. Of course, if I receive a call, email, or someone moves or changes the time, that will allow me to move forward. The time listed is intended to be a do not perform before this date and time. Now we'll start to close some tasks. As you can see, it's not very easy to tell what's next. In this case, most of the tasks aren't linked together via dependency. However, some are, and you can't really tell which are which. At this point in the video, we made a small change. It won't be reflected in the rest of the video, but I noticed a glaring flaw. We needed to move the task implementation date and time to a location that was visible to both change and task levels. This change will be made with our other changes in early March of 2014, but won't be shown in the rest of the videos today. The blue task above is dependent on upstream task 26650, but in this case, that's not the first task we need to close. The first task is number 1, suspend title. So we'll open that task And we see that it's in the acknowledged state. We'll move that to the in progress state, and we see that the blue hourglass shows up that we are currently working on this particular task. The next step is to close that task. Open the task back up and move it to close. At this point, we have to have a completion code, and we can add notes or move on to the next task. Basically, at this point, we repeat the same steps over and over until all the non-linked changes are complete. You can pick the completion code when you move to close or at the drop-down box above completion detail. You can also add details in the completion detail area if something came up. The completion closed codes are complete with errors or issues, or withdrawn, which means you didn't complete that particular task. Now we're going to speed up the video to go through the other implementation tasks and get to the one linked task in this example. The final non-linked task is release title jobs. And finally, we hit our only dependency. We'll open that one up and look at it in full screen mode. And we can see that we have the dependency between that and the other item. We can go ahead and move that one into the in progress state. Check that everything is working, and again we see that we have updated our status to blue with the hourglass on this task, and now we need to close it and push it forward. That grays out the task, and sometimes it takes a few seconds for the dependencies to be met. But now we can go into that milestone task and close it out, set the close code to complete, and we are effectively done with our implementation. The next step is to move into the verification stage. At this point, the change owner would submit for verification. This would cause a pop-up to appear that'll say the end time for the implementation. And time. Once that's entered, a completion code pops up. Whether successful or not. And once you pick successful, you have effectively moved from implementation to verification, which is a new stage. In the verification stage, we'll move the process back to the business for a request that the change meets the business needs. You'll note that the date and times that we used to have to keep open can now be left as is. We don't need to maintain those anymore. The request will go out via email to the business, and when the business approves the change, that it met their requirements as originally stated, they'll click on an email as approving the change. I'm going to do that a little bit of a bypass to get around the system. Not an option that everybody has. And at that point, our next thing is to close the entire change out. Finally, we're going to go through the closure phase, where we go into the post-implementation review, add some notes in there, very much like in a project managed situation where you do lessons learned or a closeout document. Finally, we can also resolve any linked tickets. And we have effectively completed our change. In this video, we went through a fairly standard change, including implementation, verification, and closure. Unfortunately, if the change had failed or we had had problems during the implementation phase, we would have to change the completion code to match what happened and add a short summary to the Issues area and a longer explanation in the Post-Implementation Review tab. That's the last video. We will update both the video and written documentation as we deploy the changes you've seen for change management in mid-March. Thanks for your time.